17 part 3, and it's actually lecture 18 part 1, but since I'm combining the two lectures, so I'll just call it lecture 17 part 3. And here we will introduce the genetic algorithm, which is yet another local search algorithm that in practice is not often used. It may have some kind of good theoretical property, but mostly it's a good algorithm to implement for homework. And we actually did this last summer to implement the algorithm to solve the Flappy Bird problem. The result is really bad, so I'm not going to ask you to do it again this year. And so here it has some kind of interesting, but maybe not that useful applications. So that's what I mean. But let's still talk about it. So here we're going to approach the problem of saving computation at each time when we update, and also to avoid local minimum. We want to solve these problems at the same time using some kind of randomization scheme, and we will use a specific one inspired by biology. And we're going to start with a population of initial states. So at the beginning, we are trying a lot of random starts to begin with. So we have lots of them, and then we want to somehow combine them. So basically, we're generating some specific form of the successors with random probabilities. And these ones are either crossovers between multiple states in the population or just mutation of one or few states in the population. And let's talk about what these two things are. So first, we need to figure out which two we use to crossover, and we call this the reproduction probability. And we want to use the higher cost one with smaller probability and the lower cost one with larger probability. So we need some kind of inverse of the cost. So we don't want the higher cost, the more likely we're going to use it to crossover. So we need some kind of inverse. It may not be just 1 over that. It can be minus the number is okay too, but in general, some decreasing function. And then we just compute the probability of crossover by just the fraction of the total fitness. And we're calling this 1 over costing the fitness. And probability is basically just directly proportional to the fitness. So what we're going to do here is we have a lot of instances. So in the Flappy Bird example, we have lots of birds, and then some of the birds are really good. So say it's the high fitness one, and some of them are not so good, so they die at the beginning maybe. So the low fitness ones, and say these are high and this is low. Then what we're going to do is use this probability to randomly pick two. So say we pick this one, and we pick another one, say that one, and then we combine them using some fixed algorithm that I'll talk about in the next slide called crossover. And then we generate not one child but two children, and these two children are basically some form again of combination of these two parents. And then the parents will just die, and we will not add them to the next generation. And then we do the same thing again because we want to keep the same population size. So the next time maybe we pick this as a parent, maybe we pick the same one, it's okay. And then we just combine them, and then we get two children again. So with some smaller probability, we can actually pick the one with a low fitness and maybe that one again, and we combine them again and get two children. So we want to basically keep the population size the same. So if we keep doing that, there will be higher probability of these high fitness ones getting crossed over and basically passed down to the next generation. So we're basically keeping the good ones and we keep a population so that there are still some kind of randomness, so there are still some kind of variation. So that will be the case for avoiding the local minima. So we always keep a large group of possible solutions. So they may have similar or different fitness, but they are all good. So at the end, after many iterations or after many generations, hopefully all of the children will be good in some way, and then we can just pick the best one. So that's the general idea. And let's then talk about crossover, how to do this. So what we usually mean by crossover is one specific method that's outlined here. It's the first thing is we need to encode these states by strings. And suppose we have two parents like this. Then the way we're going to do to generate the children is just pick the first part of the first parent and pick the second part of the second parent and just combine them. So you get one child, that's this. And the second child is the remaining one. We're not picking stuff by random. So they're kind of deterministic. We just pick a random position and we cross over like this. So these will be the two children. So if we cross over at a different point, we can use the first part, this part, plus that will be one of the children, and so on. So that's what we mean by crossover, usually for most of the problems. And mutation, as the name suggests, it's just mutation. It's just a substring. One character is changed randomly. So for example, if we have 0, 0, 0, then we can change 0 to 1 with like probability q. Hopefully q is small. So with large probability, actually probably 1 minus q to the power 3, we are staying at the same state. So we're not just randomly changing stuff all the time, but with small probability, we can still change. So in general, we'll keep the population kind of diverse, but it's still mostly good. So that's the idea here. And of course, there are some modifications to all of these that's kind of specific to specific problems, specific games. We use different crossover ideas. So the one that we talked about, the often used one, is called one-point crossover. So of course, you can have multiple points. So basically, you can cross over something like this. So this part plus this plus this plus this will be our child 1. And then the remaining parts will be, say, child 2. So the most extreme version is you basically have one character as one part. And so what we're actually doing is we just pick the first letter, or one of them as our first child and the other one as the second. And the next one maybe as the second character of our second child and the second one as the first child and so on. So basically we cross over character by character, and it's called uniform crossover. So these are basically just some variations to solve specific problems. And for some problems, mutation doesn't make sense. So for example, if we talk about the traveling salesperson problem, then if we say randomly mutate E, so suppose these are 5 states, we want to travel through these 5 states. And if we mutate E to B, then this is no longer a solution. It doesn't make any sense. So what we do is we usually just swap them, and we can swap A and E, so we can get something like this. But sometimes this is not ideal for this particular traveling salesperson example. Because if we just swap two of them in the middle, we're not changing the order. So we're not going the other direction. We'll just suddenly go to E and then go to B again and then BCD again. So it's kind of confusing why we want to do this. So for traveling salesperson example, we usually do something called two exchange. So when we swap A and E, we just flip the order of everything in between. So basically the BCD part, when we swap A and E, we flip it to D, C, and B. So basically the general order is like the same, but so we're not suddenly jumping to other state. We just reverse the whole part of the trip. Okay, so I talked about this example already, and I do want to show you something that I showed you very early on at the beginning of the summer. We talk about a neural network and using genetic algorithm to train a neural network, basically, and to generate the training data, basically, essentially. So we talk about this Flappy Bird example that I said I actually used last summer in a programming homework. So let's see, let's skip to some place here. So what we're having is, at the beginning, there's a population of birds, and we just let them fly according to some neural network. And some of the neural networks performance is better than others. So these ones, for example, they are good. And we just repeat this many times. And here, as you can see, a lot of the children of these birds, they are performing very well already. So what we're doing here again is basically each bird is represented by one neural network, and then the fitness is basically how far they go. It's the fitness, and then we have two neural networks, and the way we train these neural network is basically we use crossover and we use mutation. So mutation is kind of obvious. We just randomly change a weight in the neural network, and crossover, I think what they are doing is just combining some of the weights from one of the parent and some of the weight from the other parent to create one child bird. So there may be some adjustment because I think directly combining those weights may not make sense. So in their description, I think you can follow the link and actually see their code, how they combine the two neural network. There should be some kind of adjustment other than just the direct crossover of the weights. And also at the beginning of the term, we also look at the example of using neural network and genetic algorithm to drive cars. So for example, so most of the cars are not working at the beginning. And if we train many times, so again, each car is represented by a neural network, and we cross over exactly the same way, we mutate the same way, we just change some random weights, and then we combine the weights for two parent, and then we generate a child, a car, or something like that. And at the end, still most of cars, they do not work, but many cars will drive very far. And I think I showed you the end of this video already, so I'm not going to wait for it again. And on my website, there are some other examples, such as the training people to walk using genetic algorithm. So at the beginning, we have a population of people, and they cannot walk. And after we cross over and mutate many times, they will learn to walk eventually. I think last year we waited like 10 minutes and people still cannot walk. So, but in any case, if you're interested, you can wait for a while and see if they. It actually takes a long time to train these things if you use genetic algorithm. That's why it's not often used. Okay, so let's look at another example, maybe the genetic cars. So basically we have different shaped cars. So some of them can drive, some of them cannot drive. So I think some of the parameters are the size of the wheels and the shape of the car body. And that one is actually good at the beginning. So again, each time the way they cross over is they combine the shape of two cars that are performing very well in the previous iteration, like the one here, and then they do some kind of mutation as well, and then they keep trying this. Let's fast forward and see after a while what's happening. So at the end, some of these cars actually look like good cars. And the one here will probably try for a long time. Maybe not. We can fast forward maybe again. And then a few of them will be working. And so that's basically the idea. So as I said at the beginning of this part, they are good for interesting projects, for homeworks, but they, in general, it's hard to use this kind of algorithm. It takes a long time to train. Okay, so this is just a summary of what happened in mathematical notation again. And some of the variations that we could consider, for example, is parents can survive. So at the moment, the version that we introduce, they only produce children. They don't survive to the next generation. But we can allow that, and we can use ranking instead of fitness. So the fitness here is basically some inverse of the cost, and ranking is just how good. So it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And we can use that to compute those reproduction probabilities. And crossover, I think we talked about this, crossover random bits, we can do that as well. So it's basically when we have some kind of endpoint crossover with n being the same as the length of the strings. So as I said at the beginning, the algorithm is not as good as hill climbing in general. So we still prefer to use hill climbing for these local search problem anyways. And the same problem with hill climbing, the way we design the states, the way we design the strings becomes very, very important, because crossover strings need to have some kind of meaningful state crossover so that the children, they still make sense. So that's even more important here for this algorithm. And in theory, I don't know what the theory is, but in theory, crossover is more efficient than mutation, because I guess mutation is just changing random things for no reason, but crossover is keeping the best part of each of the parents.